Hi BookTube, I'm here with my July wrap-up. And this month I also noticed that I had an unintentional theme throughout my reading, which is religion, which is pretty cool because I always love engaging in thoughts about religion. So, this book is an exception in the fact that it didn't talk about religion, and in the fact that it's a new release, and I rarely ever read new releases, but I heard about this book on Reddit, and I clicked the link, and as soon as I saw the title, I knew I had to read it. It's Convenience Store Women by Sayaka Murata. This is about a young woman working in a convenience store, obviously, but it's about so much more. It's about struggling with the desire to fit into society, and that the characters can see the benefits of fitting in, but don't necessarily know if that's what they want in life. It's about taking your own version of success and living it despite the pressure. So our main character is Kyoko. She's also asexual and aromantic, who has trouble driving her personality with the world around her. She can, however, pull off seeming normal due to her hyper self-awareness and skills in incorporating others' ways of talking or acting or dressing into how she presents herself, something which all of us do, whether we consciously know it or not. It was a really good book, really quite short, to the point, and I enjoyed it. Next, I read 3 volumes of Fables, which wasn't on my TBR. This is something I felt like doing. I read volumes 5, 6, and 7. I just really love the Fable comics, the stories, and they're really getting to more depth in the world, and the characters are starting to come through. If you don't know, Fables is a graphic novel which is about fairy tale creatures that have been displaced into modern world. And the story gets much more complicated after that, but it's really nice. You know, I really liked how we actually got away from Bigby and Snow and concentrated on some of the other characters instead in these past few books, which I really enjoyed. Okay, next, this book, I don't know if I should include it or not because I DNF'd it 30 pages from the end, and I'll explain why. So this is God Says No by James Hanahan, which deals with religion, which is my unintentional theme here. It's the story of Gary Gray. He's a fat, black, gay Christian man, and it's all about his struggles with his homophobic views of religion and being a homosexual. It's written as a memoir, and the writing reflects that of a person not really interested in developing a writing style, but more in getting a story across, and their thoughts. And this was done on purpose, but I felt like it did interfere with the story a bit because I didn't feel like there was enough plot and character development to carry the story, and to then lose the writing there as well. It just kind of didn't keep my interest. I felt like it really only presented stereotypes, not only of that kind of aggressive Christian belief that we see in like Bible thumpers and stuff like that, you know, the homophobic Christian sects, but also of the 80s and 90s gay scene. You know, gays are having sex in parks and in bathrooms and stuff, and I know that happened, but it didn't present any kind of alternative to that as well. The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is the sequel to Hyperion, which was the personal stories of 6 pilgrims who are journeying towards this creature called the Shrike, who is going to kill 5 of them and give one of them a wish. That was a creative narrative there, but there was also a really creative narrative in The Fall of Hyperion, and that one character is dreaming the actions of the others, so we get to witness his dream, which is the story, and then we also get his commentary on it and people talking about it as well, which is really cool. This novel explains everything that's hinted at in the first one and extrapolates it further, bringing in political intrigue, questions about religion, like whether God evolves or can be created, what role does sacrifice play in our relationship with God, and even some really interesting theories on Abraham's offering of his son to God. It also equally talks about art and poetry and its role in society. This novel has everything I was looking for in a book. It is a perfect book in my mind. The style of the writing is poetic and lyrical. It deals with lots of philosophy, it has lots of action scenes in it, it deals with politics and the intricacies of that. On a completely different tone, we have Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. This is a standalone in the Discworld series. It follows the god Om, who is currently stuck in the form of a tortoise, and his unwitting prophet, Brotha. Om's problem is that while he has a whole city dedicated to his worship, no one but Brotha actually believes in him. They believe in the structure and the priests and the holy texts, which may or may not have been written by the actual prophets, and the Exquisition, but not the god. The observations on religion versus faith in this are really profound, and it's kind of also wrapped up in this really funny story at the same time. I just love how Terry Pratchett is able to do that, and that ending is, I'm not going to spoil it, but it is one of my favorite endings in any book ever. Next, I read A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr. This is another book about religion. This is a post-apocalyptic novel about Catholic monks. Monks that are charged with protecting scientific data, even though they really can't understand any of it to begin with. The story spans thousands of years, with the monastery as a central figure connected with certain motifs throughout. Miller was a Catholic, even though he struggled with his faith and actually committed suicide. But he actually managed, in this work of science fiction, to not just fall back on the criticism of religion that often occurred, but he actually gave it serious consideration and showed that science and faith are not mutually exclusive, like so many people on both sides still believe to this day. This book, to me, didn't feel like your typical 1950s and 1960s era science fiction. For me, I kept having to go back and reassuring myself, I'm like, no, this book is written in 1959. This book was published in 1959. It just didn't feel like it. It felt like a very modern book. The characters felt more fleshed out, the themes were not cliched, even the futuristic world felt more real than anything I've read from that same time period. It was really well done. Then I read Foundation by Isaac Asimov, and this is about psychohistory, which is more about predicting the future than it is about actual history. And it's about ways to solve universal conflict without violence and using lateral thinking. So we get 5 stories in this that are all interconnected. They span hundreds of years, and they all feature different leaders of the Foundation, which was initially created to preserve knowledge, but evolves through various crises. I really enjoyed that this was more the story of a society, more of like a history told through short stories, as opposed to just kind of one era of it. And the characters each showed how opposition and thinking outside of the box actually helps society. This felt more like the science fiction I know from the 1950s and 60s, where plot and character are maybe not as important as the ideas that are presented, as the warnings for future generations to read this and hope that we don't end up like some of the worst societies that they are predicting. It's almost as if science fiction authors are psychohistorians themselves. Lastly, I read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This was actually a reread. In rereading this, I think it's important to state that you can love something and still be critical of it. You can still see its shortcomings. So although this book has many problems with racism, it is still a very good book in my mind. Since it seems people are more familiar with 1984 as opposed to this masterpiece, I will tell you a quick summary. This is about a society that is allowed to exist through controlled apathy. People are so concerned with the pursuit of pleasure that they don't realize they're being controlled and manipulated. We have a few characters that are obviously at varying stages of questioning the society, but the primary vehicle for this is someone who's born outside of the society. It also deals with religion and addresses why Christianity is no longer practiced and the creation of a religious experience as an opiate, quite literally, for the masses. I adore this novel, and I'm going to read this quote, which is also one of my all-time favorite quotes. But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Mond, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. All right then, said the savage defiantly. I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. Not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. I claim them all, said the savage at last. So that's what I read in July, and let me know what you read in July. And thank you for watching. Kitty cat!